Thank you everyone for being here and with your patience for our delayed start. This meeting is being broadcast and live streamed. All right, well, we're going to start with reviewing the budget with vocational, LRTC, middle school, and high school. And I believe we're starting with Rob Callahan.
Yes, and let me just introduce this briefly, if I may. Rob is our first presenter as director of LRTC, and he'll be followed by a couple of school principals tonight. And in subsequent meetings, there'll be a principal or director that'll be making a presentation. He has a handout that has a three-hole punch in it, I believe, so that you can put it right in your budget book, right? Three-hole punch. So the idea is that Rob will go through trying to give you an overview of his area of responsibility, LRTC. And in so doing, he'll talk about things that are new to the budget, as well as maybe some wishes he'd hoped that are not in this budget. And you may have some questions on that. Then Bobby is prepared to put up on the screen the details. In this case, it'll be essentially Article 2, which is Article 3, LRTC. And boards have done it differently. Whether we go through it line by line or page by page, that'll be up to the chair. But we're prepared to do that if that's the board wants to do. And I think between the board being new, between Bobby being new, we may find that we need to make some changes. Whether it happens this year or not remains to be seen, but we're going to be very sensitive to ideas that you have about how we can improve this process, because I'll be the first to admit there's a lot of information, or actually it's really data. And how do you make it information that is actionable is one of your challenges as a school committee member. And with that remark, I'm going to run downstairs and get my budget books.
All right, Mr. Callahan, just if you could hit the button.
Mr. Chair, and Bill, before you head out, so I think this information is awfully helpful, but I personally want to see this at least 2 days before our presentation, because I sat and looked through our budget books, and all it is a bunch of numbers. There's no justifications for any increases. It would help us formulate some questions before our meeting, because when we come to a meeting and we have a half a dozen presenters, it's kind of like when the PBL presentation to the committee happened. There was so much information pounded to you in a few minutes' time. I personally didn't absorb hardly any of that PBL discussion. Where if we have this ahead of time, we'll be able to formulate some questions. So I don't know if other committee members agree with that. Maybe we could all give a thumbs up now, so that staff for Wednesday can be prepared with this.
I'd like to see that.
Thumbs up. See, I'm a thumbs up kind of guy now.
I've been talking with the administration about this. I think they're so used to, one, it may have been like this in the past, but yes, information should be submitted much sooner and in our packet. It's just an adjustment period right now, so even though Sue and Bill are aware of this, it's the other side, other folks that are presenting information to the packets that are still in the mindset of it's usually in there a few days before.
Yeah, so that's good input, and what we'll do is I'll get the word out, and our goal will be to, with the agenda, to have those sheets with it. They'll obviously be electronic, and then you'll get a hard copy here at the session.
Well, I want to thank everybody, the school committee, all our good guests this evening, for the opportunity to come here and present this budget for the Lewiston Regional Technical Center for FY 19. Just I would characterize it in general as what I feel is a pretty sensible budget, a pretty responsible budget. We have worked very hard to be good stewards of the public tax dollar. We realize that these are difficult budgets, and that there are no sort of pet projects or extravagant expenditures in here, I think you'll find. We also know that the cost of educating a student in the career and technical education area can be expensive. To that extent, we do our best whenever we purchase something or we make a request to be as economical with that request as possible, to make sure that we're getting the best value for our dollar, and whenever possible, and I'll give you some instances, to see if we can't have, for example, equipment is always a big one, to have that donated or shared in terms of an expense, because oftentimes we find willing industry partners that are willing to support our students. So that's something, I guess, underlying this budget. Please know that there are other pieces at work that we think very carefully about before we come to you with a request. So with that being said, just a quick overview for those of you that are not as familiar with the Technical Center. We offer 22 different program areas to students. I have them listed on the sheet. We have 22 instructors, 3 Jobs for Maine's graduate specialists, 4 ed techs, 1 guidance staffer, and 2 administrative members on our team. We operate out of 2 locations, the Lewiston Regional Technical Center main campus and the Green Ladle, which sits adjacent. Some of you may know that most recently we added a plumbing program. And again, that's a good example. We waited, and we're fortunate enough to be involved with some state monies that became available for that purpose, for the creation of plumbing programs. So for the last 2 years, the state has reimbursed us essentially the cost of about half of an instructor to begin that program. So again, we look for those sort of opportunities to be able to deliver that much needed program area at a reduced cost. Some of the things, again, that it's good to know about us, and I've listed them under the key highlights area in terms of our graduation rate, our placement rate in both in employment and post-secondary and military, our program completion rate, all those things that we're really proud of, and our technical skill attainment, that is students that are achieving an industry-related credential, so that all of our program areas are aligned with a national or industry standard, or one that's been adopted through the State Department of Education. So for example, our welders work towards an American Welding Society certification, or our culinarians are working for the American Culinary Federation certification. Not only does that allow us to be very transparent with our curriculum and allow people to understand what it is we do, but it also allows students to really be part of a curriculum that's viable in the workforce. The one thing that to me would be a great tragedy would be the student going through and completing 2 years of a program and finding out the equipment they were trained on or the curriculum that they worked with no longer has a relevance. And for us, that's a critically important piece. So our automotive folks work under the same ASE certification that you'll see in industry. Our CNAs are obtaining state certifications that's sanctioned by the Board of Nursing, and so on. And again, when you see those placement rates and those graduation rates, that's a very key indicator for us, because again, that lets us know not only how our students are doing, but how will they fare, in the years to come. And again, that's an important piece of what we do, workforce development. I guess the other thing that we're very proud of is the fact is, as you can see, that we are the largest career and technical education center in the state of Maine. That we serve more students in the program areas, the 715 currently, than any. And we also do so at the least dollars per pupil of any center in the state of Maine. And that is something, again, we're very proud of. There are some centers that are over $10,000 or $11,000 per pupil. We're somewhere between 4 and 5. And again, that goes to the good stewardship of our faculty members. Many of them come from, most of them come from industry, and they realize what handing a budget in to a superior and knowing that it's going to be scrutinized. So again, we welcome that kind of scrutiny in our programs, and we also feel good about the things that we do request. We have currently, just to keep going down our list here, we are enjoying the fact that we have earned our NES&C accreditation as Lewiston High School has. We go through a very similar process every 10 years, and that requires us to undergo a pretty thorough audit of every program and everything that we're doing in our program areas from industry professionals, and they write an extensive list of recommendations and commendations. And again, our last visit was very successful, and so we're pleased that we have earned that accreditation that we're working under. In terms of current initiatives, one of the things that we did in terms of developing expanded pathways for students to especially post-secondary education is created or become part of the statewide Bridge Year program. And we're very pleased that we're partnering both with Lewiston High School and Edward Little High School. They each have sent us now, we're up to our 5th cohort of students that are not only enrolled in a career and technical education program working towards their high school diploma, but concurrently earning college-related credit to do that. It's an intensive program. We had our first cohort graduate last year. They were from Edward Little. And what we really love about it is the fact that this is a program which prepares students who may, at the beginning of their experience, be sort of unsure about whether college is actually for them. And what they found out is they're very capable. That sometimes they're the first in their family to go. Sometimes they just lacked a little bit of that confidence. But this program, through its cohort model, provides that. And it has really allowed them to be successful in post-secondary. Again, this is a grant that we wrote, so there's no additional cost to the district for this. But again, it's something that we feel is incredibly valuable. Again, I'll move through that list, or you can move through that list at kind of your perusal. But again, I think you can see that our dedication to our community, in terms of the number of community service hours that every program is asked to complete, is pretty extensive. That the outreach that we do with employers, we have employers fairs, also just so that each one of our program areas has what we call a program advisory committee. Some of you sit on them actually, and what it does is it allows industry professionals to feed back on our curriculum, to talk about the experiences that we're offering to students, and make sure that it's relevant, make sure that it's viable in the workforce, and make suggestions about equipment or curriculum or anything that they feel needs to be brought up to par. So again, we feel like the doors are really wide open, and we seek the expertise and the guidance from those local industry professionals that hopefully will be the employers of our students today, going into the future. Again, the other thing that we do that we're very proud of is our work with our post-secondary partners, and we have over 30 agreements so that students, for example, in our IT program now can earn 9 credits while they're with us towards an IT degree at Central Maine Community College. And we have a long list of other schools that we fall into that same category with through other programs as well. I did talk about our enrollment. One of the things that we're also very excited about, and and I'll be honest, it's an increasing issue for us, is our applications. You can see that while we have 715 first and second year students in our programs, and it would be about 365 spots for next fall for first and 1 year programs. We have 446 applications to date, and we won't make selections until mid-April. So those numbers, are telling in terms of the way that students are receiving career and technical education opportunities. I think they're seeking them out in greater numbers than ever. And unfortunately, though, we have the problem of saying no a lot more than we'd like. And so I think as weeks and months go forward, I think I would be looking forward to having conversation with you about different opportunities. Frankly, we have grown as big as we can get within our current building. Our last shop, the plumbing shop, came at the expense of some of our maintenance space and supply. So we're at the point now where we couldn't add another program if an opportunity presented itself in our current space. And that's, again, something that's problematic given the number of interests that we see every year. Again, I think I've talked about some of the things that we're doing in terms of goals. Our employment programs, we have a summer program in the building trades and IT areas. We have a robotics camp that we offer to middle school students. The number 4, bullet number 4, again, this is a big one, that ability for students to be successful on those industry related credentials and the assessments. They mean something. They will put students money in their pocket. So that testing is something that we put at a premium. And again, that engagement with the community. I feel very strongly that all of our students leave us with a sense of the community they live in and the talents they have acquired through us to better that community, to contribute, and to make sure that they play their part in contributing those talents where needed in our community. So some of the things that we're looking for, and again, we don't feel like this is a long list, and this is just sort of a highlight of some of them. But one of the things, again, with this certification piece, particularly in our trades areas, and specifically towards this first item in our automotive area, you'll see that we are certifying more and more students every year in our ASE curriculum. What that means is there's not only written tests that they need to complete, but they need to go out and do skills tests. So it's not enough to say, well, I completed the module online that showed you how to do a brake job. You need to go out and do one in front of an ASE Master Certified Mechanic. And for us, that's a tough thing when you have, on a given day, you have 35 plus students in that program that want your attention and need to have that attention in order for you to be successful, whether it's to practice or to be tested out. So what we're asking for is the addition of an ed tech that would help with that process, that would have experience in the automotive industry, that could assist students as they go about obtaining those industry credentials. And the other piece, and I can't emphasize this enough because it's a huge emphasis at LRTC and all of our programs, is safety. With the amount of cars that we have in the air in a given day and torches that are lit, saws that are spinning, we worry constantly about safety. All of our students in the trades areas receive OSHA 10 certification that we put them through. They have shop-specific safety training, but really for many programs, there's nothing that can substitute that direct visual contact that we need to have with our adults looking after our students. So what you see here is really a reflection of that. Again, you're welcome to come into our shops. We'd love it, just so you see the amount of activity that happens in a given day. And frankly, again, one of the things that we struggle with is the idea that we never want to be holding students back. There are sometimes we have 4 or 5 student groups that are stopping and waiting, and that can get frustrating for students. And where we have a group of students that are doers and kind of want to be up and moving, it's a hard thing to say, could you just wait 10 minutes while I work with another group? So that's why that ask for the ed tech. The next piece is a teacher leader that we're looking for to support. We have 5 new faculty members this year. So a lot of the work that this person does is related to helping them get acclimated, helping them with their certification process. Again, most of our folks are tradespeople and professionals from former careers, so obtaining state certification to teach is a big piece. Mentoring them and making sure that we have folks that are available to listen to a lesson and give feedback to folks that weren't classically trained as teachers is an important part of what we do. So this person would be working on those functions, helping us doing professional development, during our PLC time, and again, just making sure that we have that constant dialogue with our faculty to make sure that we're being responsive to what the needs are. Again, we started our plumbing program and we hired a guy that said, hey, we should add a heating piece. And that's a great thing. So we are going to be adding an oil burner certification for students that are interested. But one of the issues we've got to cut a hole in the roof to vent some of that when we start filing those boilers. I think our upstairs neighbors, Mr. Langland's folks, would not be happy with us if we just vented them in the building. So part of that request is simply so that we can get out through the roof in a safe way. We've worked with Louis Turcotte to design, and again, we do utilize our own students to do some of that work, but they will be installing that vent so that we can get out and fire those boilers and allow students to have that live work experience that we want them to have. In our engineering area, we have a laser printer, which has been a phenomenal ask. I think we've had it for 5 years. This school committee was good enough to bless us with that. It's something that, again, in the industry, it's part of what's happening. And the space shuttle, when you look at what they're sending up, they don't send toolkits anymore. They send a laser printer that has the ability to print a wrench, for example, that can turn a bolt. We have a phenomenal instructor who has really challenged students to be creative in their designs, and they have done a lot of amazing work around that. Unfortunately, we had our first service call for that printer in 5 years on that piece of equipment. We've tried to do most of it ourselves, and it was almost, I think, $2,200 for the labor and parts and everything else. It's a $45,000 piece of equipment, so what we're looking for here is just a repair line that's commensurate with that. This also includes a plan for our brand new wide format printer that we have in our multimedia shop. That we do a lot of posters, we do a lot of graphic design. It's photo quality, so again, this is an important piece for students in that program to be familiar with that technology as well. And again, that's just reflective of what you see here. There are a couple of other budget increases that bump some maintenance and repair. Even in our green ladle, which I think is 10 years old now, we're seeing the signs of wear in some of our equipment. I'm a firm believer that equipment needs to be maintained, not only because, again, it was just paid for with good taxpayer dollars, but also because it reflects a commitment to safety and to industry standards. We would never expect students to accept employment in a place that didn't look after safety equipment or didn't have equipment that is viable in the workforce any longer. So those are the things that we have asked for. I would also just make a note that in our, I have it here, in our budget book, and I'm sorry, on the left column, what you see there, that 350 or 240, that relates to the org code and the object. But one of the things that is in our budget relates to, and I think you may have heard or are going to hear this from Mr. Terrio in relation to the IT department, the addition of a, excuse me, the addition of a support person. Excuse me. It's 223039051180, and it's labeled as a tech assistant. And again, this person would physically be housed in our building, would do support for our desktops, but would also work to do the same for the folks at the high school and through adult education. It's a critical piece of what we're doing. So much of the curriculum that we have, excuse me, has a foundation in technology, and where we have downtime, we have non-productive student time and teaching time. So the addition of this staff, and I think Mr. Terrio can tell you more about it, is critical to maintaining that level of operational readiness. I guess the only other thing that I would say is, again, this budget represents not only a commitment to the students of Lewiston Regional Technical Center, I apologize, but we work very closely with the students in the administration at the high school and adult ed, so that this building, as we speak, there are adult ed students there welding and the nursing program, doing things that, again, will allow them to be economically viable in the workplace. And I'm very grateful for my partnership with Jake Langlis and Bill Grant, because we've been able to offer this programming. For example, our summer youth employment program, which allows us to bring students in to do work in the building trades or in IT, but the direct beneficiary of that, much of the work they do is here in the school department. So it serves many purposes, but it couldn't be done without the good partnership from those administrators and those programs. So again, a lot of what you see here is also applicable to their programs, and again, we would look forward to continue with that. So I guess I could conclude my opening remarks. I'm very happy to entertain questions on specific budget items or concerns or questions that people might have.
So I'm going to suggest that and the board may have questions, and Rob's would be great at answering them, but I'm going to suggest that the blue covered book, you turn now to Article 3, and likewise you turn your green colored detail book to Article 3. And I believe Bobby is going to be able to put the blue book Article 3 on the screen. We're still learning. Definitely better. If you can just scroll just a little bit over to the... So, we want to just highlight a couple of things to help the board understand this. And this isn't just for Rob, one account. You'll notice miscellaneous, which is that 6th line down. And Bobby, you want to offer just a brief explanation on that? You probably should go to the microphone.
Other category has just that. It is a variety of things that in the past the school district has budgeted for things like unemployment. It's budgeted for things like teacher retirements. It's a conglomerate of different items that sit in this category.
And I think as you and I talked, it's not the responsibility of the principals or directors, that line. And later on in the budget process, we'll present some details on that account. So if you could hold off on that. The other thing I'd like to mention, and maybe Bobby, you could just go down to LRTC technology, which is just a couple lines down from where you are. And you will see out right there, you'll see that first line of LRTC technology, salaries, support staff. You can see there's an increase of roughly, I think it's 55,000, which represents a 108% increase. That is that additional tech person that Rob mentioned. And if you go to your detail book, your other book, and on page 2 of the LRTC detail, you will see down toward the bottom, new systems administrator. So when you see new, you know that is a new position. And that was on my budget memo, and also Rob referred to it in his remarks. Likewise, and just to jump ahead, on page 9 of the blue covered book, I'm looking under the LRTC auto mechanic program, and I see a $20,000 increase for salaries, educational technician. Again, that's on page 9. Rob made reference to a $30,000 additional position. That would also include all the benefits associated with that. But again, if I were to look at the detail book, the green colored book, one would see new, the additional ed tech in the automotive area. So with that, I just wanted to point that out and help this board a little bit, because that mirrors the type of thing you're going to have with some of the other schools as well. Thank you. Ms. Ray?
Thank you. So one thing I was curious about, do you already have 2 teacher leaders and you're adding a 3rd, or you're budgeting for 3?
That's correct. We have 2, and we're adding a 3rd.
Okay, thank you.
For the teacher leader, is that an additional amount that a teacher gets paid on top of their regular salary?
That's correct. It's a stipend that is negotiated through the collective bargaining agreement, and then that's the stipend that a teacher leader receives.
Okay, thank you.
So this teacher leader would help other non-traditional instructors. And so how many instructors do you have in LRTC?
22.
Okay.
And you know, for what it's worth, they're all, you know, I think with the exception of my early childhood education teacher, I don't think any of my folks, you know, formal training is in education.
All right, and so why the need now to add the third? Is it?
I think with 5 new faculty members, you know, that's a cohort in and of itself to navigate some of that that support piece. The other thing is again again certification, professional development, and there are also sort of new initiatives as it relates to curriculum development. You know, our work with proficiency base that we're trying to work in smaller cohorts to get our folks up to speed. I think we've done a good job with it. I think what we found is that sometimes that folks don't always have the access to their leader as often as they like.
And just one more if I could, and it's more probably directed to Bill or Bobby, but so the Empower software, is the cost to that, does LRTC have a component there?
There's no allocation to LRTC in this budget for that.
So it's for the high school in general, or?
The high school in general is what's in this draft budget, yes. LRTC essentially has juniors and seniors in their program, and so they would likely continue on the present model as things now stand.
So is there any chance that we could get one document versus it spread out through the budget on Empower School, the cost, total cost with the list of it's here, the price it up?
We'll make a point of giving that information, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Could I follow up on that? There's a note for an Empower facilitator stipend then on page 2 of the detail book under staff services. Would that not be needed given the answer we just got?
So if I might, so we do have, you know, in preparation for our work with Empower, we have had a faculty member from our business area attending the district meetings and providing us with some basic training. Although we haven't formally implemented it yet, you know, we feel like we need to be prepared, and so when it does come, this person is sort of our point person for that professional development.
Okay, so that's something that's already been happening, but it's new to this budget.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Something I always ask, and it's not just this segment, I try to ask it at all segments. First, what are the cuts that you made, if any, this year? And 2, if you were to had to put these in priority, the items that you mentioned, why is the top priority the most important, and lastly, what is the least important? And if you had to, I know you've already worked on this budget, everybody has, and this is kind of probably already the bare bones, and there's probably a lot more to it, but just to have that conversation.
So, you know, I guess as I mentioned to you earlier that you know, this is something that we've gone through and you know, looked at from many different ways. One of the things that we did was moved. I'm trying to think. It was about $15,000 or $18,000 from this budget into a Perkins federal Perkins grant that we are beneficiaries of. So we've displaced some of that, and again, what that will mean is that we do that testing at the cost of renewing some of our equipment. You know, things that will displace from the Perkins budget as a result of that. But again, we recognize the serious you know, impact of a budget, and we want to make sure that we're contributing to the extent that we can. In terms of our priorities, for me, safety is always the first priority of our students, so that having that ed tech and the ability to know that we have an extra set of eyes, and frankly, you know, this is someone that I could envision moving down to the carpentry shop if we have, you know, in the spring, our folks on a roof, on a shed, in a parking lot. You know, we need that second set of adult eyes. We would move this person as that need dictates. And, you know, as hard as it is, and hard as it has been to have our equipment down, safety would be the priority for me, you know, in that regard. So that's why I represented it first.
wasn't clear. Which one was the least effect?
Well, as I move down, I guess I would say that you know, with a priority on safety, I would sort of place at a second tier priority the having our equipment. So some of the printer service. You know, if we did not have our vent program, again, that would just make, we would not be able to offer that certification because we would not be able to fire the boilers. And again, that teacher leader component is an important and critical piece, but I'd place it high on that priority because again, our folks have a need for you know, for professional development and the ability for our folks to especially have that those peer visitations, someone coming into your classroom and offering a non-evaluative type of visit that would say, hey, great lesson today, here's a few thoughts. You know, that's what I would place. I guess it stems from my belief is the most important thing we do after safety is teaching and learning. So anything that impacts that most directly is high on my priority list. And I think that those teacher leaders are a direct and very valuable source of teacher quality. And so that's why it's reflected the way it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. I know you mentioned before that essentially LRTC has grown as big as possible with the current facilities. I guess just pick your brain a little bit. How do you see the future of LRTC as far as an expansion goes? You imagine coming to the board in a few years saying, hey, here's a budget request to expand. Do you see it more likely as working with Auburn's, the new EL is expanding? How do you see that happening?
So I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you, Mr. Jensen. One of the things that we have had discussions about, I've made a presentation last year to this school committee and also to the Auburn School Committee, is it relates to the new Edward Little High School. We currently have program applications before the Department of Education requesting that they allow us to bring new programming online. So that should we be granted that approval, hopefully they would also concurrently be granted the ability to incorporate new CTE related space within that new high school. And I suspect that what I would be coming to you before you to request is that we undertake a cooperative agreement with not only Auburn but with the other four partners that we have. You know, I guess as a way of backing up for a second, at LRTC we serve 6 area high schools, not only Edward Little and Lewiston, but Lisbon High School, Levitt Area High School, Poland Regional High School, and Oak Hill. So what I imagine that we'd come to you with is a request, you know, with a draft of a cooperative agreement that would look at not only cost sharing related to those expanded programming opportunities at the new Edward Little, but also enrollment and all the things that go along with that. We need to hire staff. The way the law currently exists is that they would, you know, work under the purview of Lewiston Regional Technical Center, and it would be, in essence, be a satellite program of our main campus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Piggybacking on that, are there any programs that you feel the enrollment is really low that maybe you wouldn't need to run in the future that could make space for other programs?
So let me back up for 1 second. Say that's something that we monitor very closely as the state. On October 1st of every fall, we have to submit our enrollment counts to them, and if they have any concerns, they will let us know. Boy, there's a watch on this program. But as of this moment, all the programs that we offer are at or above whatever the state requirements are. So we feel as though, again, you can see that's borne out in our applications. We will say no to students. I expect April 15th we're doing, or thereabouts, we're doing our new student enrollment. I suspect every one of those 375 program seats that I mentioned will be taken up. We do, quite honestly, lose some students in the second year through graduation, you know, inability to fit it in our schedule. So we'll see a little bit of melt, as I call it, in the second year, or students that decide, you know what, I don't want to be a welder, I think I want to be a carpenter. So we'll get a little bit of movement that way. But we're blessed with the problem of you know, pretty close to pretty full enrollment at the moment.
Seeing no other questions, one thing I'd like to provide is a little bit of kudos. Before we started the meeting, we talked a little bit about that, so if you feel free to let us know what's happening.
Thank you very much. So again, one of the things that we are extremely proud of is the work that our students do, the investment of time they put into their program. You know, it's a great place to come to work every day when you know that you got students that are waiting for you at the door. I have faculty members that are there regularly at 6:30 in the morning with students saying, hey, you know, could I get a head start on what the day's work is? They'll stay after. And I think it speaks to the power of career and technical education, that students really see there's a personal investment that they make, but there's very real rewards and returns for them. So one of the ways that we sort of celebrate that success is through our career and technical student organizations, which are basically not only statewide but national organizations that exist in areas of business and the culinary arts. And in a case of our largest, Skills USA, it has a reach in many program areas. And you know, in Skills USA, you're talking about 300,000 or 400,000 students nationwide. It's the single largest student organization in the United States. And so this is competition season for us, and we are competitive, and proudly so, because we would love to show off the good work that our students do. So about a month ago, we went down and competed in Portland against some of the best culinary schools in the in the state of Maine in the Pro Start competition. It's entirely judged by local area chefs and throughout Maine. And our team of 4 young women were really earned a great day and earned the first prize, for which they will go to the Nationals, which is going to be in late April down in Newport, Rhode Island, where they'll be competing with the best culinary students in the country. So that we are very proud of. In our Skills USA, our recent Skills USA competition, we had students that competed in roughly 30 different program areas, you know, all over the map: electrical, plumbing, culinary, IT, you name it. We were there, and we brought home close to 20 medals, gold, silver, bronze. And again, that just shows you the work. And I think more importantly, and I know some of you had a chance to join us that day, it's amazing to see the level of competition. We had you know, a gold in robotics in a competition where, you know, we're talking now with the Lewiston Police Department about using that robot chassis to work with some of their hostage rescue situations. They saw what we did and said, is there some way you could build a robot like that for us? So our students are excited about solving real world problems. In 2 weeks, we're headed to Portland to compete in the Future Business Leaders of America, and I know we have students that are very well prepared. Their business plans, their casework is razor sharp at the moment, and they're looking forward to going down there and seeing how they do against, you know, again, the best business students in the state of Maine. The other added benefit of this, many of our students leave not only with a great feeling about themselves, but also with employment, with scholarships. Folks do pay attention, and it's one of the great things about the state of Maine is that there is that real interest in what the educational system does for us and what it can do for them. So again, we're very proud to talk about those kind of accomplishments.
I'd also like to point out to the board how this ties into the schedule in tab E. And that tab E starts out with revenue, and then it shows the major expenses by article. Articles 1, 2, and 3. This is in the blue book. And you'll see Article 3 up 4.5% from this year, with a total budget of $3,255,675. That amount is the exact same amount that you'll see at the end of tab 3. So this 2 or 3 page exhibit in tab E is kind of I like it as a kind of a good starting point. You see what the level of increase is, and just to kind of get you thinking about where does this stand relative to the overall. So I don't know whether the chair wants to go through page by page in Article 3, but I wanted to at least mention that we didn't really do that last year to speak of, but in past years we have taken it page by page.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that I have one question. Other than laundry money for the greasy clothes, what is one thing not in your budget that you wish you'd have?
It's a great question. Again, I think that, you know, I guess I would start by answering a good question with a very honest statement, and that is, I think we've been looked after very, very well by the school committee and by the taxpayers of Lewiston. So, you know, the things that I would mention are important, but we do pretty well in terms of having what we need. But I think, you know, the idea that, you know, in our supply lines, you know, we try to be as frugal as possible. We use both ends of the board, as they say, all the time. We are constantly looking for ways through donations and other things, but our supply lines are tight, to say the least. And our instructors really work over. The poor guy at Napa in the automotive program loses money every time he walks in the building because we're hitting him up for something else. And again, I have no shame about doing that. I'm shameless in terms of mooching for for when it comes to our students. If I believe in that cause, then we'll ask. But those are things that, again, directly go towards students gaining those skills, being able through repetition and confidence building to be able to go and find employment and be productive citizens. Thank you.
I'm just going to pose the question to the board about what Mr. Webster just posed. If does anybody want to go line by line, or are we comfortable with what we see for now?
Mr. Chair, personally, I'm comfortable with this article. I don't have a desire necessarily to go through it, or nothing stands out that I'm looking for per se. So I would say I'm okay.
Anybody have any concerns?
So if we, maybe just a little info on the revenue or the funds that come in from other schools, do they come to us?
The we get a state subsidy, and unlike some regions, we do not bill schools. The state does that calculation for us, and so Rob gets that subsidy to cover all the students in that program. It's in the 8279. There is a line right in there. If you want, I can show that to you.
Yeah, please.
So if you would turn to, I think it's tab B in the blue. And tab B is the 8279. And if you go to page 6, page 5 of the 8279, in the middle there, you'll see Career and Technical Education Center allocation, $3,186,960. If you compare that to Rob's expenses, his expenses are of that same magnitude, and you can see $3,255,675. And there's a very modest difference, and something that we don't spend a lot of time talking about from a budget standpoint. But if you look at Rob's sheet, you'll also see the number of classes that his staff give to students at Lewiston High School that count as some of the programming for there, and we deem it a very good investment all the way around. Right. So, yeah, on page 5, under item number 8, other adjustments to state contribution, these are things that the state that are not impacted by a local share contribution. They are 100% state. So in our case, you can see it affects line 6, which is CTE, and line 8 is the regionalization money, and next week you're going to be getting more information about that. The other lines on here will probably stay zero, except lines 10 and 11. Main care seed. Ultimately, when the state determines the liability that we owe for services provided through DHHS, there'll be a deduction on that. But that's something that we budget for, and in the past we were directly billed for, but now they're deducting it from subsidy.
All right, thank you. And I would assume y'all realize that any dark highlighted line in our budgets we can't read. You just can't see.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
So that's on the ED 279. So, Bobby, maybe we could put on a list to get clean copies of the ED 279 for this, because you should be able to read that. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have copies of that digitally as well from when Bobby presented it. If you want to look at it in the meantime, it's in our Google Drive.
Any others for discussion? Questions? Shall we move ahead? All right. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Appreciate it. Lewiston Middle School. All right. We'll move ahead with who will be presenting on this? Jana Mates, principal of the middle school. Jana Mates will present on the budget for the Lewiston Middle School. I believe this is what tab. Is this under tab 1?
So the middle school is in multiple articles. I assume that the bulk of the regular instruction would be in tab number 1. But Jana will first give her overall presentation, and then we'll get into the articles. Again, tab D was in your book, in which you could accumulate the various handouts. You don't have to put it there, but I put mine in tab D, and I put them in the exact order of presentation, so this would follow the LRTC one, and that way I look at the budget schedule. It also serves as an index for that tab.
Last week we had extra books up here for people in the audience. Do we still have any extra ones around?
Okay. Good evening. The first sheet is just some of the demographics and numbers represented at the middle school. Asked Dr. Laderi to sort of break down on the second table that you have some of our special ed programs, which Pam Emery will go over in more detail when she does the special ed budget. But do you want to talk about those?
So the good evening, everybody. So the table that Jan is referring to in the middle of the page there, under the category of special ed identified, it breaks it down by first our 3 self-contained classrooms that we have at the middle school, and then the resource level students are as described, students who are on our teams in the middle school, 3 7th and 3 8th grade teams, and they have IEPs with varying degrees of needs for either special education classes, or they're also, some of those students may be part-time in general ed classes like social studies and science. And you can just see the breakdown there of the numbers if you have any questions about that. Also included in that number where it says resource room are students who might have what we call consultative levels of IEPs. So they have identified special ed needs, but for the most part, their services are, they're able to be delivered in the least restrictive setting throughout their day. And then you can look over from the number of students in the left column to what's projected for next year, and you can see the increases that we're expecting. So we get all of the 6th grade students coming up from all of the elementary schools that have IEPs. And part of my job as the supervisor is I go out to those elementary schools and meet with the teams and the parents in what we call transition meetings, so that we know well in advance what the needs of the students are coming up, and also working very closely with Mrs. Emery, of course. And so she and I'll be back on Wednesday to be with Mrs. Emery to talk even in more detail if you have any further questions specific to our special ed population.
I just wanted to point that out because when you look above at the number of teachers that we have, we broke it down by general ed, special ed, and ELL. Again, the RISE programs, day treatment and functional life skills, those are more self-contained programs, so they have their own staff members right in there. As you can see, our enrollment is projected to grow even more than it has. I don't even know what the enrollment was last year at the middle school. I think we're up 40 this year and projected to be up to close to another 40. So about 80 students in 2 years. So we're pretty close to capacity in the building as well as far as rooms and space. Currently at 772 students, 209 of those students, 27% are ELL, 123, 16% of our students are special ed, and 571 or 74% are SES, meaning socioeconomic status. They qualify for free or reduced lunch. If you turn it over, on the other side, a couple key highlights that we're looking for next year, and I asked Pam and Eric to be with us to share on that.
So we get to cover kind of the fun things that we have planned for next year. And the first one is around the looping piece for our entire school, which was kind of a vision of several principals ago. When Mr. Shabbat was the principal of the school, we had talked about increasing the number of teams that loop in our school. And so we're going to bite the bullet and we're going to go next year and be a looping school, which is really exciting stuff because there's lots of positive things about that. It's around relationship building. It's around we decrease the loss of instructional time, that second looping year with kids. Roughly, the staff says that are looping currently, there's about a month that they gain back that second year, that they don't have to spend that time grouping kids, learning about kids, because they can pick right up and go that second year around. So there's that piece. There's the relationship building between students. They become a family more so than on our teams. We have teams for that purpose. And then it's just another level of that social emotional piece that has our kids ready. They know their teachers, they know each other, and the teachers have a better sense around the academic strengths of their students, the academic weaknesses of their students, where the struggles are, on the social emotional level and on that academic level. We have one of our looping teachers right here, and the teachers, even the ones who were like, oh, I'm not really sure I want to do that, who have tried it, have said they wish they had been looping from the get-go. So we're really excited to start that out next year and be a looping school.
The second piece on our highlights of coming initiatives at the middle school is the opportunity to pilot some expeditionary learning. For For those of you who are familiar with King Middle School in Portland, this is one of they've become a partner school for us. We're in sort of a mentor-mentee relationship to begin some expeditionary learning at the middle school next year. It's also sometimes synonymous with project-based learning. For me, when I think about what this is, what these expeditions are, what these projects are, it takes me back a lot of decades to my own 7th grade experience. We had one of those traveling science fairs come into school, one of those animal shows that those of you who have young children are probably familiar with. And they brought out all these different animals, and the chameleon was the highlight for me of this traveling animal show. And I was absolutely fascinated by how this chameleon could change colors. So I did a bunch of research into animal adaptations, and I figured out that these little gecko lizards actually could do the same sort of thing. So I had to figure out a budget of how I could actually purchase one of these little gecko lizards for myself. And then I put this little gecko through all these different trials to try and get it to change color. You know, I warmed it up, I cooled it down, I put it on some red felt, all this stuff with this little gecko. Worked with my science teacher to be able to study cells and actually how to make in the cell, how the pigmentation would change. And then at the end of this, we had a big science fair at my school, and I went and presented, and I had my booth, and probably 50 or 100 people came through and asked me questions about my experiments and what I had done. And so this is a very simplistic version of what we're talking about with an expedition or project-based learning. Our partnership with King is basically building this process out into a full curriculum cycle where there is a kickoff event, there's guiding questions that the students would ask, there's field work that they do, they bring in community experts to work with them, there's some anchor texts that go along with their research, there's a lot of interdisciplinary connections. I think of my little example, I worked primarily with the science teacher, but there was also the math component. I could have gone even further with it in the expedition model. There's final products and a culminating event. I could have gone even further with it into technology and other things of how animals adapt and how even things like camouflage or other things have come about from that. But we're really excited about this opportunity to work with King to bring this model to the middle school. And we see it as really an opportunity to connect with a lot of the work that's happening right now with PBL, both getting students excited about what we're doing and getting that entry point, but also for those students that are meeting, being able to stretch their thinking and their learning into that exceeds realm with these different pieces of the expedition.
So if I may, just because I'm not sure the board knows everyone that's presented. So Eric Anderson, assistant principal, Pam Butler, assistant principal, and Lee Lattieri, special ed supervisor.
And one of the other key highlights that we put on here is that currently at the middle school during the schedule, we have what is called academic seminar. This year, Mondays and Fridays, we've dedicated that academic seminar to more social, emotional, and connections building, really working on building relationships with kiddos. We've gotten a lot of good feedback for that. So we're going to be separating that next year and having a small advisory block every single morning for a chance to really just check in with kids, see how they're doing, kind of feel out where they're coming from, especially for some of our most fragile students that are coming from tough home experiences. And then building the academic seminar at the end of the day as an opportunity for them to get any reteaching that they need done, any standards recovery. So we built that into the master schedule. Our budget, fairly simple. We are moving our tech integrator and our math teacher from Title I budget into the regular budget. Those positions have been in existence for a couple years, but in the Title I budget, so we're just moving them over into the regular budget. Asking for a little bit more professional development money, even though King Middle is providing professional development in kind. In order to get some of our staff here this summer to do some of the training, we would have to pay them the hourly stipend. and then some additional money for contracted services to continue our work on restorative practices and again the expeditionary project-based learning in sort of like a consult model to just make sure we're able to check in as we go to keep the momentum going there. The budget reductions, took a really close look at the budget this year, being my first year at the middle school, and sort of compared it to the past couple years and in what areas are we sort of using the monies that are allocated versus which article lines have we consistently not been spending the money there or been overspending. And those were different areas. That the books and periodicals, just by nature of being one-to-one with the computers. We have a really fantastic library. Been working really hard to get our guided reading library up to where it needs to be in the classroom libraries, but as far as the amount of money that we've been allocated to the actual textbooks, we were able to save some money there. And I did that just to sort of offset other areas. I heard that I might get in trouble for this one, but the $2,500 for the adult meals to model behavior, I still don't entirely understand what that is, so that might be one for further discussion. The $30,000 for additional summer PD days, that was for the 2 additional Empower days, and so that was taken off. Some money from the library, and again, if you look at the itemized list, they're still leaving money in those article lines. These are just areas where the past couple years has been a little bit of extra. And then money from the Office of the Principal Accounts, and that's just because, you know, we've been able to work with what I have in the office, and Jake left me in pretty good shape there as far as sort of equipment and supplies needed to run the school. And then the other ones were cut from intramurals, and that's just because it's really tough budget season and everybody had to sort of make some cuts. So those were ones that were in my original budget proposal. The ones below were sort of ones that were cut before it got to you. And so do you want me to share out on those? Yeah. So we had originally proposed, if you remember back at the workshop that or the dinner night that we had done with you guys, and we were talking about our sort of journey to pilot expeditionary and project-based learning. And one of the key things that we noticed at the middle school or any schools for that matter is the amount of students that we have struggling socially and emotionally, the amount of students that we're having to potentially bring to disciplinary hearing and send to the Dingley School, or students that are, 3, 5, 10 days at the suspension diversion program, students that we're sending to Poland Spring Academy or to Franklin, and really trying to think about how can we make some adjustments within our own school so that we can keep these students in our buildings and part of our community. And there's a lot of research that goes behind community-based organizations and sort of taking those organizations that students thrive at, Tree Street, Boys and Girls Club, the Y, and bringing some of those staff members, whether they're 22, 23-year-old recent graduates that the kids identify with, or coaches that they have, or counselors in the summer, and bringing them into the school and really supporting their social emotional needs there, so they're not necessarily an ed tech or under the same Lewiston Public Schools contract, so they don't have the same responsibilities of the teaching and the lesson planning. Instead, they can really just build relationships with students. Often do a really good job de-escalating kiddos for us, or serving as a, sort of like a suspension room within the building type of thing. But it costs money to get those staff members in. And at this point, I don't know if I can justify advocating for that over an instructional position where there are buildings that really need instructional positions. It's also something that we're working to write some grants for. And so that was sort of my trade-off, to try and find some grants. It's a pretty hot topic right now, and there could be some potential areas, but if we have some extra money, that's something. And I know it's one of the goals for the school budget, goal number 7, to pilot this. I know it's something they're looking at the new high school, and so it'd be nice to be able to try it for a year or two at the middle school and see how it goes, especially if that would give us some information to potentially use to vet against the direction the new high school is going to go. All of the schools in an effort to just get the budget to where we needed to be, had to cut money in instructional supplies. That's a tough one, especially moving towards the expeditionary learning. We need supplies to do some of those projects and those expeditions. Again, we'll do what we have to do, but I think as much as we can have those things so kids can be as hands-on with their learning as possible. We also cut some of the co-curricular stipends. For a lot of our kiddos, these after-school clubs and activities are sort of the one of the things that get them to school, and to get them at least socializing with their peers and interacting. And so to be able to re-implement or reinstitute those into the budget would be great. And this one I'm not completely clear on, but the fitness room at the high school, I think, was originally, the equipment was grant funded, with the idea being that the middle school sustained the equipment in there or took over eventually. Anyway, long story short, it's in need of some new equipment. We're growing by next year we'll have 80 new students. The equipment is getting old and running down. And so the PE teachers have asked for some new equipment. So I put that in there. Again, when you're sort of weighing out instructional supplies for some of our expeditions versus exercise bikes, it's kind of like you have to pick and choose. But I think it's important to honor, our unified arts programs as well. So.
Discussion, questions from the board? Ms. Ray?
Not a discussion point as much as thank you for preparing this in this way. This is very clear to me, what you're asking for, adding, subtracting, and your priorities. So if that's helpful for other people to comment on as we're receiving these, if there's like one standard way that works for everyone. This works for me. Thanks.
Mr. Care?
So on your instructional supplies, so last year you were budgeted for 20. Where are you on, or where you budgeted for? Yes, you were budgeted for 20,000. Where are you on track for your instructional supplies now? I see you spent,
as far as this year?
Yes.
Like what have we spent?
Well, I see you spent 14 as of January 31st. Will you utilize that 20,000 most probably? It will, and would you, it'll be zero out when? Soon? Does that go through quickly?
Yeah, we each month, Bobby provides us with sort of an updated, and I go into Munis and look. And so, we have a sort of want list already in place for people, and we're just making sure that, we're keeping a pocket of money there just in case something comes up. But yeah, we won't have a problem spending that down to zero. And again, with, adding 80 new students, I would like to see more money in the instructional than less, but sure.
So let me play the devil. If you want more money in your instructional supplies,
yeah,
what are you willing to give up?
Look at all the stuff I already gave up.
Quid pro quo. If you want us to add money back, we need to take it from somewhere to balance everything else. So what would you be willing to give up? Where would you suggest making more?
I'll give more from the office of the principal. I'm being new there this year. I'm still. I don't want to go down to zero in those areas, but like I think as an office staff, we're pretty set that like we don't have to have it posh in there. But I also don't want it to be a situation where something like the two-way walkie-talkies come up and that actually falls in my budget versus something else. So I feel like there are still some things I'm not entirely sure on, and so I brought it down as much as I felt comfortable. But I definitely think those areas. I could, to get that 3,500 back, I could re-itemize this and probably figure it out.
Follow up. What else was cut from the budget before it got here besides your big items?
I honestly think that's it.
I'm glad you mentioned the walkie-talkies. Last budget presentation we had, there was questions about communication and the walkie-talkies weren't working in certain parts of the building. Has all of that been taken care of?
So they ordered a new set, and the new set has been working a lot better. In here, and I'm just getting there as well. We reduced the Office of the Principal equipment, but left it still at so it was 8,000 2 years ago, and then they brought it up to 10,000 with the idea of getting the channeled radios and repeaters, and then I dropped it down to 5,000, knowing that I would still like to get 5 more to give one to each of our team leaders, so that if, like for a fire drill, for example, we have at least one person with a two-way radio at a channeled post. But should there ever be an evacuation that's not organized like that, it would be nice to have the team leaders to each have one, especially if we're trying to find out where a student is, like attendance-wise or something like that. The team leaders tend to have a little bit of a better say. So we are planning on ordering the 5, and that'll come out of that budget. And I think it was like $3,800, which will still leave me $1,200 cushion there. But yes, thank you.
That will resolve the communication. Everybody will be able to communicate the way they're supposed to in the whole building?
Correct.
Okay, good, thank you.
I'm just curious, Mr. Fuller's in the room, if he knew of any equipment he might have, bikes or whatever you mentioned. You might want to, you may have already talked. No? No? Okay, that was the other part, right? And if it is, I don't know if it's specific equipment, but maybe we could put a call out to the community. I'm sure there's somebody that has an exercise
bike that's got
Awesome.
laundry on it.
Yeah, just a suggestion.
So Bill, is there an actual one? I didn't bring my green book. I only brought my blue book. What the budget that was presented to you, and then what's the difference? What the recommended amount is that in the blue book? Just for her.
Yes, if you look at the blue book, you see a requested column, and you also see a recommended column.
So that's right in the tab.
It's yeah. So for example, I'm on tab 1, page 12, which has on it the last lines in total of Lewiston Middle School regular instruction. And I can see that the total of this year's budget is $3,215,000. The initial request is $3,871,000, and the revised request was $3,512,000.
And that's her total budget.
That's
everything
in regular instruction, Article 1. There, she also has expenses in a couple other articles, which we'll get to. The other thing I might mention, because it's helpful to me to think of it this way, if you look at that budget increase to $296,000, 9%,
yeah.
Among her requests are 2 positions moving from Title I to the regular budget. And then you also see that increase in miscellaneous of $90,000, which we're going to up-to-date the board on later. So when I add that all together, I've accounted for approximately $200,000 plus of that $296,000 increase. And if I took those out, my increase is now around 3%. And that is the inflation assumption that we used in this budget.
So just to kind of fall back on Tina's comments, I mean, truly some significant cuts from your original budget has been made, and I apologize for not seeing that directly, but so you've done well with that budget, considering that budget's mostly personnel costs, if you really look at the big picture.
Allowing us to put the tech integrator and the math teacher into the regular budget for the Title I will allow us to use our Title I funds for some of the interventions and like our Ice Week and Mud Week and Summer School and those standards recovery type things that we've been trying to piecemeal together for this year. And so that's sort of the idea there to really enhance the literacy and the math at middle school and close some of those gaps. So I appreciate this if it is able to go through.
Do we want to open up to the public at this point? I think we have one person who has a question. You'll have to step up to the podium. I suppose. Look at that.
No, it's
well,
don't go anywhere, Jenna.
Okay.
Which is why I was like, that's silly. I guess my question is, if you remove the personnel costs, which are moved from Title I into this, which is great to free up Title I money, and you see what's left is really essentially a 3%, which was the budget inflation, and yet you're serving 80 more students. Can you tell me the percent of student body versus the percent of budget increase that this is reflecting?
No. Can I get back? Okay. Again, I mean, are there more things that we want and need? Absolutely. I think I'm trying to be mindful as the district as a whole. I also think with the shift to sort of the more project-based hands-on, like the first year is, going to be a pilot year for us, but we're really looking at changing our teaching philosophy and the approach with students. We're going to need some supplies, but we're not going to need a whole lot of tangible things. And Lewiston is a district that has so many resources, and the middle school's downtown. So many of those resources we can take advantage of by walking to or asking different people in the community to come to the school and work with us. And so as with anything, while you're sort of vetting it out or in a pilot year, we're going to try and make it as low cost and no cost. If it goes well, next year's budget proposal might look a little different.
So, if I may, just on your question, Jan is correct that the middle school may be up as many as 80 students from last year, but that's 40 students this year and another 40 next year. And I also wanted to mention, because this went before the facilities subcommittee chaired by member Jensen, next year's number represents about the peak that we're going to see at the middle school, absent a major unexpected influx. So while it's tight, I'm comfortable that we have the facility that can meet those needs. The other thing I wanted to point out was we've talked about the middle school expenses in Article 1. Prior to the meeting, Bobby shared with the board a brief description, and if I had caught her earlier, I would have said, let's put a 3-hole punch in that, but you can slide it in the front tab. So the middle school is in Article 1 for regular instruction. There's also a component in Article 4. There's a component in Article 5. And the Article 7 has the principal's office in it. This is a requirement, and this is one of the challenges, because you as a board are approving the budget by article, but it makes it kind of messy in that you don't approve it by location. But we've already talked briefly about on page 11 and 12 what's in Article 1, and we can talk about the components in those other articles as well. I don't know if Bobby, is anything you want to add to that? Okay.
What's the feel on the board? Do you want to go through each article? Or any questions on any one of those? Just care?
Well, I think we need to come up with a new way of budgeting and presentation, because this breaking one budget up amongst 3 different articles, that just doesn't make sense to me. There's no way, and and I've dealt with budgets for, you know, nearly 20 years, and I'm looking in this budget and truly I'm lost. I mean, I was lost as soon as I opened it, and I have been since I've been reviewing it. So if I struggle, and I'm not going to speak for anyone else who may or may not be struggling, but you got to know the general public. There's no way they could go through a school department budget and have any understanding. So I know the discussion's coming up down the road. In fact, I hope it's on an agenda item, so that, because I think Bobby's trying to make some changes, but it would be nice if it was you know, as soon as we pass this budget, have a agenda item where we all have input in developing a budget style for this district that is a bit more accessible to not only us but staff and the citizens.
So, and I appreciate that, and districts across the state struggle with this, so maybe we'll come up with a better template to do this. Maybe what I could do is at least just walk you through the articles, so you'll see all the areas that the middle school impacts. So we've already talked about Article 1. We're going to skip Article 2, that's special ed. That will be a separate presentation. In Article 4, other instruction, if you turn to page 5, you'll see near the top, co-curricular for Lewiston Middle School. In addition, on page 6, you'll see athletics, Lewiston Middle School. So this is on Article 4. Again, I'm in the blue book. And you can look on the detail book to get some of the more details on that. But you can see there's, if anything, those expenses are going down in both articles. So that's Article 4. Article 5, which is instructional support. So this includes your guidance counselors as well as technology. And you can see at the bottom of the first page, you can see guidance middle school. And the total of that is on the next page, up 4.6%. You'll also see the next section, school nurses. On page 3, there's a school nurse for Lewiston Middle School. Staff training for the middle school is on page 6. You can see that $30,000 reduction that Jana mentioned. That's followed by library services. And you can see the Lewiston Middle School Library on page 8. And there actually is a change in that, because that librarian last year was budgeted as an ed tech, became a certified librarian, and we upgraded that position, but the budget had already been set. It's now a school librarian, and our librarian that was there is now back in charge of all the elementary school librarians. The instructional technology will be part of the technology presentation that follows. So there's a middle school component, but Dave Terrio will be doing a full presentation on that.
Bill,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So when a department head submits a budget to you, how is it submitted to you? Is it submitted to you in all these different areas, or is it one document that gets split up in finance?
It doesn't get split up. So the principal's budget for many of their accounts, but not all of their accounts, and they have a budget input sheet that in this year it was Margot White, our accounting manager, that put that in here. But the we can, and Bobby may have some thoughts on this too. We can sort by different codes, and but at the end of the day, you're also responsible for approving it by article. And so what's the best way to do that? To present a location budget, and if that looks good, and then we roll it up into the article, but there are going to be increases or decreases in articles that might not make sense unless you look at an article base. So that's one of the challenges. So this is the approach we've used for the last several years, but I fully appreciate that this is a black box that's hard to wrap your arms around. The last remaining article, actually there are two that I want to, two or three I want to mention. Article 7, which is school administration. So Jana, the assistant principals, and all her office expenses are part of that. And you can see that begins at the bottom of page 5 and is totaled on page 6. And the only other two things I want to mention, Article 9, which will be a separate presentation on facilities, but if there are facilities expenses on the middle school, they're in there. And also, just because it's a requirement of law, all other functions, the LPS crossing guards are in Article 11, and I believe there's one additional guard for that Five Corners area that is so problematic for the middle school. I think that I guess I'd leave it to Bobby, and Bobby may not be in a position that she feels she can comment yet or not. I don't know whether we could do a printout by location that would include all the expenses that are in each and every article. Okay.
That give you enough time for the next budget meeting?
For Wednesday? Yes, we could. We could if you wanted
it. What I don't want to do is overwhelm staff or department heads. I think it's, we just need to start calling this out, because the way it's been done has just been challenging, even as a city councilor. Looking at a school committee budget coming to us was very challenging. So I don't want this perceived as pressure when we're right in the middle of budget season. So I don't think it should be on your priority list, but if it's something that can start to happen, it definitely would help. But just make sure you don't knock other things off, or department heads have to get involved and set aside things that they should be doing.
And I think, I'm trying to think, the Wednesday schedule, is that ELL, which is essentially the elementary schools. Yeah, so that would be one where that might be particularly helpful. Yeah.
Any other discussion, questions, Ms. Ray?
Get what is being said about the location versus articles versus however we might represent this, but I think it's important to have that location context still personally, because, you know, Longley is not the same as Geiger, is not the same as, etc. So I think as we're looking at this, maybe not throw everything away right away, but thinking about improvements rather than tossing it all out might be helpful too for context.
And I can understand Mr. Webster's perspective on the articles and how it should be, has to be organized the way the state requires it. But, and of course, there are certain items that would probably not fit quite in a location because it's a district-wide thing or something like that. But it would definitely be helpful one way or the other, as you mentioned it. So, any other concerns or anything at all before we move on? Ms. Hutchinson?
I'm just gonna say this. I have a real big problem with cutting instructional supplies from our classrooms. Those are a direct impact on our students, and I'd like to see some look taken at where else we may be able to come up with that money. $3,500 is not a lot. There's got to be some place we can come up with it. Thank you.
So, Bobby, you're making a note of that. Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, shall we move forward? All right, before we move forward, would you like to take a 5-minute break?
Great.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess.